You create the culture of, I want you to think independently. I want you to make mistakes. And we're going to collaborate together to try to minimize those so you can learn. There's ignorance and stupidity. You can't get angry because someone is ignorant of something, because it means they just don't know. I never heard anybody say, I get too much praise for the work I do, or I get paid too much for the job I do. It's the small habits repeated consistently over time. It builds trust.
This is the Relentless Pursuit of Winning podcast, where we are here to educate, equip, and inspire people to build extraordinary companies. We're so glad you're here. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you can get updates every time we drop a new episode. Now let's get it started. Hey guys, this is the Relentless Pursuit of Winning podcast. My name is Rick Meekins, and I am your host for today. In the studio with Matthew Hoffman. How are you, sir?
I'm excellent, Rick. How are you doing today?
I'm doing outstanding myself. I appreciate you being here.
My pleasure. Excited.
You know what, guys? Matthew is the communication guy. He talks about communication with people, with businesses, and relationships. If you get a chance, make sure you check out his podcast, Kickass Couples. It's a rock star. He and his wife do a fantastic job with that. So before we get into it, though, I would appreciate it if you wouldn't mind subscribing, hitting the bell, make sure you get updates every time we drop a new episode. And without further ado, let's get into it. Matthew, would you be so kind to introduce yourself, sir?
Yeah, my name is Matthew P. Hoffman, and I am a marriage and relationship coach and also do business and executive coaching full time.
Awesome. And how did you get into this?
Well, I came out with my first book about 4 years ago, Kickass Husband, Winning in Life, Marriage, and Sex. And it kind of got me into the space a little bit. And I didn't want to be that guy that just was an author with a bunch of boxes of books in his garage. I wanted to sell them, help people, get them in their hands. And so I really just started thinking about what I wanted to do and had an opportunity to come full time into the career. I've done some training, development, speaking, and I really started honing on coaching, and I've kind of jumped in all in to make full time. I'm a core energy coach, and that's what kind of brings me, I guess, a little bit of mission and purpose there, but gets me super excited.
Wow. I got a couple of questions there. Let's go back to the book, Kickass Husbands. What inspired you to write that? That's one of those topics where it's just like, okay, this sounds like a cool thing. Is this a box that we check? What brought you there?
Yeah. Initially, it's not something I wanted to do. I'm part of an accountability group, a men's group. There's about 5 of us in it. It's called Kaizen, which is the Japanese word for continuous improvement. And we have a deep relationship. We've been meeting for over 12 years. We get together once a month for half a day, and we hold each other accountable in our businesses, in our personal lives. We have a high level of trust and really go deep into things that we're struggling with or want input on or feedback. And a lot of my guys, after a couple of years, said, you ought to write a book. And when someone tells you, you ought to write a book, you go, yeah, well, that's your dream, not mine. Thanks, but no thanks. That's nothing I'd ever thought about. And they kept giving me that. And then one of my friends said, why don't you start writing ideas down? If you were going to write, what would you write about? And I said, okay, well. And so I started doing some of that and got a few chapters and ideas written, had some thoughts down. Then I put it aside. And I had an opportunity probably about 6 years ago. I was coming out of real estate development. I knew there was a finite period. I've been in the business, corporate world and real estate for a long time. And I had a break between one job and another job. And I said, this would be a really good time to finish this. And so I said to my wife, we're still working part-time. I said, I'm going to take the other part-time and I'm going to really get serious and finish this book. She was in big support of it. And it's funny, the original name, Rick, was not Kickass Husband. It was going to be called The Husband Quotient. I don't know where I came up with that or why. And she goes, what the heck's up with this title? She goes, what is a quotient and who wants to be it? And what is it? She goes, you don't want to be a quotient. You want to be kick-ass. I went, oh. And I said, well, am I? And she goes, of course you are. You're a kick-ass husband. And I said, that sounds awesome. Good to me. I mean, I wrote the book about her and my relationship, and I do have a co-author in it. It's small, digestible chapters, 52 to be exact. And I talk about, here's my experience, here's what I did and why, and the impact. Then my co-author has been in the marriage family therapist space. He's a Gottman trainer for 25 years. And then he kind of says, here's what Matt was doing. This is why it's important. Here's what happens if you don't do it and what'll happen. A lot of people don't like to be told what to do, men especially, but if they understand the why, like why would I want to do this or what'll happen if I don't, it helps make it more understandable where you can see the reasoning and the thoughts behind it, as opposed, hey, I'm an authority and do what I say. So that's kind of how the book went. And that's what got me going.
Wow, that's cool. You said 52 chapters. So is it like a chapter a week, you journal or something like that? Or
Yeah, you could. I made them short and digestible. So it's not like you've got to sit down and read the whole thing. It's kind of a handbook for men and women because it talks about specific things that come up in really most relationships and how I faced it and how I handled it. So it's kind of like a devotional. You could read one or two a day. I have a woman that bought it and she bought it on Friday and she called me on Monday and said, I read the whole thing over the weekend and I'm making my husband read it next. And I said, okay, that's good. It is Kickass Husband, but the issues are about communication and commitment and conflict resolution and trust, security, intimacy, all the things that most people face in any relationship. So a lot of common experiences that I think anybody can really find something that would relate and be helpful.
wow. So this is like a pre-marriage preparatory book, if you will.
Absolutely.
Cool. One of the things you talked about just now was communication, and it's important. What got you into that arena in particular?
So in my corporate background, I was in the real estate development and independent assisted living operations. We had almost 1,000 employees in senior living, so independent living and assisted living. And when I joined the company, I absorbed the HR function as well because the people we had weren't doing so hot. So imagine having over 15 different positions in the company, from server to cook to driver to caregiver to salesperson to housekeeper, and no job descriptions, no training program. And so I was tasked with bringing an organizational development person in, and the two of us created the entire training platform for the company. How to teach you how to do your job, what's your job description, what does success look like, company culture. And so I really had to dig deep into my communications background because we have staff starting at 15 years old
Oh,
and up
wow.
to 65. So
Wow.
how do you communicate effectively to all these different generations of people so they understand what their job is, but they're also incented to do it well? And so I brought a lot of resources together, created curriculum and ways to figure out how to be most effective so people understand what they're doing every single day to contribute to their success and the success of the company. And that's really bled over into the work, Rick, that I'm doing right now, whether it's in individual or corporate coaching or training. People say they know what they want, but they don't necessarily know how to get there. And communication is kind of the glue that makes it stick together. And if you're a leader in a corporate situation and you say, I want to drive the success of the organization, you got to communicate the vision. And everybody in that company needs to know, what do I have to do on a daily basis to be successful for my company, to be successful for me? And
Yeah.
most people, if you ask them the question, what are the top 4 things you're going to focus on today to guarantee the success of this company? Do what I'm told, respond to my email,
Yeah.
And so I think that people really miss a lot. And when we communicate well and we're on the same page, it's incredibly powerful. I can't read my wife's mind, right? I can't look at her and go, ooh, this is what she's thinking,
Uh,
or this is what she needs. I might look at her body language and make some guesses, right? But if we don't communicate it and then we're angry because somebody didn't get it or follow up or create what we wanted them to create in a company, we can't be angry. It's really our responsibility to make sure that they're crystal
wow.
clear on the exact things they need to do, what success look like, how are we going to measure it, and then support them and make sure they have the tools to execute.
Yeah. I love the responsibility piece. That's so important. As entrepreneurs, we put organizations together and we bring in people and that sort of thing. It's just like, okay, we expect it to work, and don't necessarily think through some of those nuances that you described. What are some of the biggest, I guess, blind spots that leaders face with respect to communication? What are you seeing in your work?
Yeah, I think the higher you go in the C-suite, if you're talking CEO, COO, I think that by the nature of the position, depending on, let's say you have 50 people in your company, okay, and there's 4 or 5 people that are in the executive or the C-suite, most of those other people naturally are set up, and it can be a little intimidating to work with and talk to those people. So you may not ask the questions. You may not ask for clarification, because if you say you don't know and don't understand,
Yeah.
how's it going to reflect on you? So it's really about building the culture in the organization that encourages curiosity and healthy communication. You got to create opportunities for it, and you've got to allow people to fail so they learn. I mean, think about it, Rick. It's no fun failing. I love to win. I'm a winner. I know you're a winner, right? But do you learn more from how you won or for when you lost or screwed up or made a mistake?
Yeah, definitely when you lost, yeah.
Yeah. But in a lot of company cultures, you lose points, you get demoted, you might get financially disincented, you could lose your job, you might lose responsibility if you screw up. So when you create the culture of, man, I want you to think independently. I want you to make mistakes, and we're going to collaborate together to try to minimize those so you can learn. So it's the culture of, we talk about it, whether it's in business and that business culture. My wife and I had a conversation a couple of weeks ago, and she said, how come you didn't tell me this is how you're feeling? I thought we had the deal, right? I thought we agreed that we're going to say, man, this is bugging me. I'm struggling. It's not going the way I want it to. Right. And so it's her job to make it safe for me to do that. So I know I'm not going to get punished or be disincentivized. Like, ooh, I'm not doing that again because it was painful. Same thing in business, right? We need to find ways to pull and encourage that. A buddy of mine who's the CEO of a construction services company, he'll take his employees on a walk. He'll say, let's go for a walk. Leave the office. They go out into the town and they spend 15 to 30 to 45 minutes walking and talking. Tell me how it's going. What's your biggest challenge right now? What are you frustrated with? Do you have everything you need to be right? So he's asking all the questions and trying to pull out and find out. And he often finds things out that he had no idea about. And so his question is, well, how come you didn't tell? I was afraid. Didn't know I could. Didn't know how to, right? Didn't know that's what your expectation was. So a lot of it's about communicating expectations. Hey, we're going to have conflict and we're going to have issues that it's not going to go well. When we do, how are we going to work through it? Without screaming, without offending somebody, right? How can we, in other words, Rick, if you and I were working together, I go, Rick, man, we're working together. There's going to be issues when we have problems. What's the most effective way for you and I to solve issues together when they come up? And if you go, man, my dad was a screamer. If you raise your voice to me, I'm going to shut down. I'm not going to want to talk or relate to you. If I didn't know that and I get angry and I'm passionate, I start yelling at you, I'm going to be doing the exact wrong thing. But if you and I haven't contracted and talk about it, you say, hey, Matt, this is what I need from you. And I say, all right, Rick, well, this is what I need. Can we agree to give that to each other? So we've set the stage on how are we going to work together when things aren't going well, or there is a disagreement, or there is a struggle.
Oh, wow. I love that. I see the correlation like with our relationships, but in particular with marriages. That's awesome. I had a larger team at one point. I think we had around 30 people or something like that. And I tried to create that open door policy. It was like, you can email me, you can message me, et cetera, et cetera. And I still couldn't get at that communication. You know what I'm saying? Get people to just open up and say, hey, Rick, we need to do this differently, or I tried this, or whatever it is. No one ever got in trouble for messing up. It was more like, okay, we messed up. How do we fix it? What do we do next time? I just couldn't kind of prime the pump. Any thoughts on that?
I think the answer is you can't make people do something, but you can encourage it and you can reward it and you can measure it. And what you measure, what you inspect is what people respect. When I'm coaching and working with a leader in a company, if he say, man, I'm trying to create this, like what you just said, I'm trying to get there. I'm not getting the results. And man, no matter how hard I try. So the question is, what victories are you recognizing when it does happen? Right? Could be the smallest, my wife and I try to celebrate victories, not just the big stuff, but hey, who says I have too much celebration of good stuff in my life? No one. And as a company culture, if you're celebrating little wins that Nancy down in accounts payable had, or that the janitor had, or your number one salesperson had, right? Doesn't matter. You recognize it, you magnify it, you celebrate it. Now, what message are people getting? Hey, we celebrate this. And maybe you spiff them and incent them and say, oh my gosh, for Rick going above and beyond and this little win, that's the behavior I want. Then you can say, hey, team, what do we need to do so that more of you can have those kinds of victories?
Yeah.
Do you feel empowered? Do you feel enabled? Right? So it's kind of, when you pay attention to it, it's I want you to do this, so do it. Now go do it. It's you leading by example, I think, and then creating those opportunities for excitement, for celebration. And that's the culture, because people go, wow, man, he just got all kinds of mad props for doing that. I can do that, right?
Yeah.
And it might be, hey, anybody who's able to do X, Y, Z is going to get this. It's for anybody. And then celebrating and making a big deal about it in a weekly meeting or a monthly meeting or a quarterly meeting, whatever it may be. But if people are saying, I know I have permission, but I'm not doing it, then you've got to lead by example and create those opportunities. I know that your desire was there probably in that situation. Maybe you were saying, I'm not real sure what to do here to get people to, take stock and buy in.
Yeah, definitely. That is great. So it comes down to really being intentional. You kind of alluded to it earlier, being intentional about creating a framework for communication in the organization.
Exactly. And it's with each other and it's with our clients. And if people know, one of the trainings I do, Rick, with corporations is called an RMC, which stands for Relationship Magna Carta. Most people probably heard of the term Magna Carta, right? It says, what are the duties, rights, and responsibilities, in our case, the U.S. government, right? And its citizens. Government says, hey, we're going to do this for you, but you got to do this for us. Okay. Goes all the way back to the year 1200 with a king from England saying, all the dukes are like, hey, man, you're taxing us. You're taking our stuff that we work so hard for, and you're giving it to the people. What are they doing back for us? And the king goes, you're right. We got to define it. Right. So in other words, it's here's what I'm going to do. Here's what you're going to do. And if we both do that, we're successful. So if you talk about that and everybody involved in that contract knows what the expectations are, then when there's a problem, you go back and you go, hey, this Magna Carta we got, I think we're falling down right here. Or I don't see you. Tell me how you're demonstrating this in the work that you're doing. Oh, yeah. No, Matt, you're right. I'm really not. Okay. How can you better demonstrate that quality so that we've got the equanimity in the situation in our company and we're both getting what we need? That understanding, and it's so important whether your organization is 50 people or whether it's 5,000 people. If everybody up and down that organization knows this is what I'm supposed to be focusing on, and I understand I'm empowered to do it, it's a pretty clear runway. And if there's someone who says, I'm not willing to run on that runway, then they're probably not in the right place. It's going to be painfully obvious that they're not the right person in the company and they need to either be in a different seat or off the bus.
Yeah. Wow. That's brilliant. How do you know as a leader that may not be as versed in communication and that sort of thing? I talked about the idea that entrepreneur, you're building this company, et cetera, et cetera. How do you know when communication is broken or not performing or not doing the company a service, if you will?
I think when people are not clear what the goals and objectives of the company are as a whole, like what's our purpose, right? What are we supposed to do? Mm-hmm. And then if they're in a specific department, what's my department's role? Or if I'm in an individual in a one-person department, what are my responsibilities? What's my piece to contribute? It's like if you think of a sports team, you could think of a soccer team and you think of a defender, right? The center back is the anchor in soccer, right? He's or she is coordinating that back line to have a strong defense. If that center back is not communicating to the person to the left and the person to the right, it's going to be a disaster. Because when the threat comes, who knows how they're going to react to the threat and recover and if it'll be effective, right? So I think when you look at the team, you can say, well, where are we breaking down? Okay, our offense is pretty good. We're getting lots of wins. Customer service, maybe. Our product is fantastic. But when we have issues, it seems like we get a lot of complaints about customer service. Yeah. So you can look, because if the communication is excellent, there's going to be a high score, a high buy-in, responsibility, and probably a positive impact on the company. So when there's not a positive impact, you can look at an individual, a department, or a team, and you say, all right, who's doing their job well and who's not? And then why aren't they? Is it because they don't have the resources? It's because they don't have a plan. It's because they're not talking to each other, because they don't have the leadership, right? Yeah. They not bought into the vision and they think it's not what they should be doing. Yeah. So the good leaders got to be able to say, where's the breakdown? It could be communication, or the communication might be okay, but it might be that they're just not doing what they should be doing because they don't know any better, right? There's ignorance. There's ignorance and stupidity. You can't get angry because someone is ignorant of something, because it means they just don't know. Mm-hmm. I could not carry on a conversation in microbiology. I am not a scientist. I am ignorant, right, of that topic. Doesn't mean I'm stupid. Right. It just means I'm not equipped. Now, you want me to perform in that way, equip me with the knowledge and I'll step up and I'll take responsibility, right? And in a lot of companies, people aren't equipped to do what they're being asked to do. And then we're angry because they're not producing. So sometimes that's it. But you really got to think about the team analogy. And if everybody on that team is fulfilling their role successfully, that's where the music comes from, right? I mean, you could pick an orchestra for that matter. And if the lead violinist is off, that whole section is going to probably be off, right? But when you correct the lead and everybody else is following the lead, then the music is back in tune and in sync, and it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's interesting because one of the things that was going through my mind, I think I was having a conversation with one of my kids about the difference between having a job and being part of an organization, kind of like you alluded to. Everybody's got the same mission and vision. People are tied in. And those people that have a job, they're doing their job, they're 9 to 5, they're going home, and they don't really care what's going on other than getting a paycheck. It was I think what I was thinking was that's kind of a dangerous person. The house could burn down, but as long as they're getting their paycheck, that's all they're worried about. Those are scary folks. Anyway, the other thing I was thinking about is, and I would imagine that there are principles from communication from what you've shared that would parlay into public speaking. Is that an accurate statement?
I think so. In speaking publicly, if you're doing a keynote or someone may say, hey, come speak on this issue, I think there's definitely a lot of the way you do one thing is the way you do everything. So some people go, I want you to help me in my business, in my business, in my business. Help me be a better leader in my business. And I say, okay, tell me how you're leading at home. What are your relationships like at home? How strong are they? How reliable are they? How much trust is there? What's the quality of communication like? Is there a lot of conflict? Because if you can't have the private victory, there's no way you're going to have the public victory. And so I think people think that they can focus on one thing in isolation and it's not a thread. Communication, like we've been talking earlier, it's a thread that goes through everything.
Yeah.
You're not going to be successful in most areas of life if you can't effectively communicate. And communicate doesn't just mean talk. You know, the old adage, you got 2 ears, right? Can you listen, but can you empathically listen? Meaning, when I talk about empathetic listening, I'm talking about getting in the foxhole with the person you're talking to. Their world is crazy and they're being stressed or attacked. So you get in the foxhole with them. Bombs are flying overhead, but things are exploding. Dirt's coming in the hole and you're next to them. And you're not saying, hey, let me help you. Let me pull you out of here. You're saying, man, this is hard, right? I feel you. Man, I can see how you would feel this way. Tell me what you're thinking, right? Tell me what you're feeling. What do you feel your next step ought to be? How can I support you in that? I'm here. I'm next to you. One of the key things about communication is when somebody feels you understand them, that you can feel what they're feeling, you can't be them. I'm not saying you got to be them and feel their pain, but if you have empathetically listening and saying, what does it feel like to be in their shoes? Right? There's a non-for-profit up in the area where I'm from, and they worked with the football team. And they had all the male football players put high heel shoes on and walk a mile. Sounds like a funny sight, and it kind of was, but how do you think these big muscular guys felt walking a mile in high heel shoes? It wasn't easy. It was uncomfortable as heck. And at the end of that, and that's just one small way, they wanted them to understand what some women deal with every single day. All they want to do is create a little empathy and say, okay, professional woman's expected to wear these things or have them on and do everything as good as you do without having them on. How does that feel to you? Right? So that's where the empathy comes from. And whatever you've got to do to experience it makes you more effective. When you're speaking and you connect with the audience and they go, that's me. I felt that way. Oh yeah, boy, have I ever been there. Now you've got them. And that happens from telling stories and being self-effacing and giving them something that they can go, I've been in your shoes or I'm in your shoes. I can relate to that. And wow, I like where they're going.
I liked your analogy with the Magna Carta earlier. Is there a way to create that between yourself and the audience as the speaker?
It's pretty self-directed. In a lot of the training I do, I walk people through that process. When I do it with companies, it's a minimum of a half day. So when you've got a 15 to 20 minute speaking spot, you can really speak on one thing and have some impact on it. Probably an easy way to think about it is boundaries. and this is prevalent in personal relationships and business relationships, you got to have boundaries. And it means that your boss can't steamroll you and have all these crazy, unexpected asks and demands that are not sustainable. You're married and I'm married. My wife and I have boundaries with each other. One of the couples we interviewed on the Kickass Couples Podcast, young couple, they have 2 kids, and they said, one of our absolute rules that neither of us are allowed to ever violate is we can never lay our hands on each other out of anger. Never, right? I'm angry, so I'm going to push, pull, hit, scratch, slap. Neither of them have that right. That's an ending, impossible line to cross. And if they do, there's going to be some major repercussions in that relationship, right? So that's a boundary, right? That they set and said, under no terms can this ever happen. So what's important is setting boundaries with people. And in the business, hey, this is what I need to be successful. Or like I spoke of earlier, I don't react well to screaming. If you want me to be effective and hear what you're saying, it's got to be done with respect and calmness, and I'll be able to hear what you want me to hear if it's done that way, right? When speaking to an audience, I'd rather hit one thing and go deep. So people aren't going to remember 10 things, but they'll remember one thing for a little while when they walk away. So that's what I try to focus on.
I like that. This is going to go to a different topic really quick, but you talked about boundaries and the potential for crossing boundaries. When you're creating your agreement, do you also say what's going to happen, or do you have some sort of predecision that you put in place?
You can. My wife and I have an agreement in our relationship that on the financial side, and it says neither one of us is going to spend more than $500 without talking to the other one. I don't care if it's for a new microwave, 4 new tires for the car, a new outfit I think I have to have, buying something for the kids. So that's an agreement that we've had, and we've never really violated that. But I think, it's because we've set it as a boundary. Some people say, if this happens, and this could be, if there's a volatile relationship where somebody's been cheated on, there's been infidelity, right? The boundary could be, I love you and I love our relationship and I want to work through this. However, if I ever find out that this has happened again, I'm done, right? I'm out of here because I'm not going through this again, or I'm not going through that again, right? Or you're addicted to pornography, and if you engage in that activity, I can't be in this relationship with you. If you're going to drink alcohol, right? You can have some absolutes, because if it's a punishment, it's not necessarily a deterrent, because you're like, well, okay, how bad's the punishment? And the one thing I'd say about boundaries, Rick, you got to be really careful that you're not talking about things where there's power involved.
Yes.
Power structure.
Yes.
And that could be, women are accused of this, but men do it too. And that's like with withholding of sex or of intimacy. Man, you did something I didn't really want you to do. You knew I didn't want you to do it. Therefore, we're not going to be intimate for a week. I won't be intimate. Basically, what's that saying is, I'm going to withhold love from you. I don't like what you did. That's power, right? And it can be wielded in a lot of different ways. So when a boundary includes the exertion of power over somebody else, you got to be really careful about that, because whoever holds the power then is always in control. And if somebody abuses that power, a CEO over a frontline employee, okay, that's going to have huge damage and repercussions in the relationship. And you got to be really sensitive to make sure if there are causes. Think about, you break the law, Rick, what's the penalty?
Yeah.
I mean, what the law is, or you've been educated on what the law is, and you're asked to abide by it. You bust a speeding limit, there's a high degree of certainty on a regular basis, you're going to get a speeding ticket.
Yeah.
So you can't be surprised. Oh my gosh, why did I get this ticket? Why me? Well, majority of the time you're speeding. You're breaking a law, right? So eventually you're going to pay the consequence.
What about a scenario where, and one of the things that I've always done, as a CEO is I had my team hold me accountable, for doing the things that I said I was going to do, et cetera, et cetera. And so if we were to, not that I would be disrespectful to my team, but if part of my agreement with my team was that I'm not going to deal with them, I'm not going to berate them, whatever, and then I berate them, that would be crossing that boundary. And so what would you recommend that the pre-decision might be for the teammates if something under that circumstance?
Yeah. So I think that what's really important anytime a mistake has been made or where an apology is warranted, I think the first thing, Rick, I would try to do in any violation is a full-fledged apology. An apology is not, hey, sorry. Okay. An apology is, hey, Rick, if I did something and I work with you or for you, here's the impact. You're going to make a full-blown apology, which sounds something like this. Rick, I screwed up, man. When I did XYZ, I wasn't thinking that it was going to violate the trust that you and I have, and it did. And man, I messed up. It is 100% on me. And I just want to let you know, I am so sincerely sorry for what I did. I want you to rely on me. I want you to trust me. I don't want you to be angry with me. And I violated your trust. So first of all, I want to own it and say it's on me. Secondly, I want to say, I'm not going to do that again because I don't like how it made me feel. I know you don't like how it made you feel. And I want to ask you, what can I do to make it up to you? And if there's anything I can generally do that's within my power, I got to do it. Okay. So you go, well, yeah, Matt, actually you could, the team would love to have there's a big golf tournament coming up that we all want to go to. If we only have a half day Friday, we're meeting our demands. We're doing what you want us to do. We really got upset when we were come down on kind of illegitimately. And okay, I can do that. And then here's the last piece. Mm-hmm. Rick, will you forgive? Mm-hmm. Okay. Did you hear a lot of humble pie going on there? Not, yeah. Well, I did it because of him or her, or you screwed up, or you never, you always, right? No, yeah. I said, hey, I messed up. The best leaders accept responsibility. Okay. They ask what they can do to correct it. They apologize sincerely. And then, will you forgive me? Oh, of course, man, I forgive you. So what can we do so this doesn't happen again? Because I don't want to be sitting here eating humble pie and apologize for something that I should not have done. So Rick, what do you think we can put in place so we don't have to end up at this uncomfortable position again? Okay. So if that's all you do is to correct the situation, is not to make me hurt. It's right. That I'm not going to, you don't help somebody by hurting somebody else. That's a funky sense of false responsibility, but whoever committed has to own it. Right. And I think that process, and we were talking earlier, Rick, about culture. You can say, hey guys, we're going to screw up in this organization, but you know what our value is? One of our corporate values, we take responsibility for our own mistakes. And here's how we're going to do it.
Yes.
Codify it, write it down. Here's the way I want everybody in this organization. And then if the CEO screws up, you can have a team meeting and go, hey, everybody, I stepped in it. Here's what I did, right? And he can work through, that's integrity. And people see that, they go, whoa, see what the CEO just said, man? He's drinking his own Kool-Aid. He's walking the talk, right? That builds integrity. It builds trust, and it builds commitment in any relationship. And that effective apology is incredible.
I love everything that you said. I think the one thing, and I've even done this with my kids, is, I want them to understand that I'm still human. You know what I'm saying? And because I'm older than you, or because I'm more senior to you, doesn't mean, as you were saying before, that I'm not going to make mistakes. And I find it really, really important to be able to help, in that trust conversation, to be able to help people to see that, I'm not above you. We're on the same team. I just happen to be the captain. But we're all going in the same direction. So sure. I love that. Thank you so much for that. So with your clients, you have a client, say that's, they've got, whatever communication, whether it's a husband and wife or, friend group or business or whatever. You've worked with them to create a Magna Carta or communication framework or whatever in the organization. And so, when I think in terms of strategy, I recognize that there's a tactical component to it. We put the structure in place, but then there's a psychological component in that, meaning that we have to, actually implement that into the way that we do things. I imagine the same thing happens with communication. When a couple needs to adopt the Magna Carta, change the way that they're communicating with each other, set the boundaries, et cetera, et cetera. What is that adoption like?
Sure. And I think the adoption is, Rick, it's a great question. And it's kind of taking what you've established as a standard and personally applying it. Okay. In a lot of relationships, when communication isn't good, you see a lot of this, like, you're not, He won't, she won't, he
Mhm.
isn't, she isn't, right? There's a lot of blame going back and forth. And I think what's most important, people say, well, if he would just, wife might say, if this guy would just blah, 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 life would be great. I'm like, well, okay. I understand that might be how you feel, right? But what's your role in it? And you can only control your own behavior. So let's talk about what you're going to do in this situation, right? And it's different for everybody. There may be commonalities. And in a relationship, for example, a couple may just not be complimenting each other very much. In other words, they're focused on the 20% that's bad and what they don't like, as opposed to the 80% that's good, that's healthy, and should be recognized in the relationship. Okay. So I would say individually, in putting it into action, it's not 50 things, it's not 30 things, but it's moment by moment by moment. Relationships are built through connection. Connection happens through experience. I'm working on a project with somebody. Okay. Somebody comes to me for help and we work it out and I help them. Okay. A husband has a favorite activity, and even though the wife can't stand it, she knows he loves it. And she says, I'm going to come do this with you because I take delight in seeing your joy. Right. So sometimes we have to do stuff we don't want. We have to compromise. And to take in a couple, for example, it's compliments. It's like, what does a compliment cost you? Nothing. Some time, right? One of my favorite business books is Leadership and the 1-Minute Manager by Ken Blanchard. He's a Cornellian. I went to Cornell. Probably one of the reasons I love that book. But one of the principles in there is called the 1-minute praise. Super simple, takes a minute, but you see something that's good and you call it out. Rick, I saw the way you're talking to your kids yesterday. You got down on one knee. You were so soft and tender and loving, even though they kept asking the same question again and again. You didn't lose your confidence. You didn't lose your stride. And I just want to tell you, I saw that behavior in you. And man, it made my heart warm. And I had the biggest smile on my face for the whole rest of the day. Thank you for taking the time to really make that moment meaningful for them and walk in your integrity. I look forward to seeing you do that more again. Less than a minute, right? But how would you feel hearing somebody, your brother, your father, your neighbor, make that your wife, make that? What if your wife said that to you about your kids? How would you feel?
I'd be elated. I'd be like, whoa.
Oh, you noticed, right? You're paying attention. I never heard anybody say, one, I get too much praise for the work I do, or two, I get paid too much for the job I do. Two things I've never heard somebody say, right?
Yeah.
So when it comes back to the actualization of that, it's the small habits repeated consistently over time, because yes, it's good communication, but it builds trust. It builds currency. I call it the emotional bank account, right? If your wife does that for you, she's like, wow, that's a big deposit in your emotional bank account, right? She built, your shoulders tilt back. You're feeling a little better. Imagine if it's your boss, right? If your boss comes in and goes, oh my gosh, Rick, you kicked some serious butt in that project. You got it done sooner than I thought. You made it better than I thought it could be, right? I mean, all those things don't cost you anything, but they're habits. And until they become consistent habits for you, it's like if you're not complimenting your partner in marriage and life, okay, 5 times a day, you got cash in your pocket and it's going out the hole in your pocket because you're not spending it. And, so you gotta spend the currency that you have to get the benefit. It doesn't do you any good. It just sits in your pocket, right? You're starving, but you got money in your pocket and you're not buying food to feed yourself. Makes no sense, right? And most people get stubborn or obstinate or refuse to do the things they know they should do to get the result they really want.
Wow. That was wonderful. Thank you so much for that. We are out of time, believe it or not. I know this.
Darn it. That went fast.
It did. What is something you'd like to leave our audience with? Something they're going to remember this episode by?
I think that to live in the now and to ask yourself, what am I doing right now that's going to contribute to the success, the health, wealth, and happiness of the people I'm with? And a simple way to sum that up is, what more can I do? Because I'm a firm believer, Rick, that when your outlook is who can I help and how can I help, it's going to come back to you in spades. But when your focus is what's in it for me, right? What can I get? How is this going to help Matt out?
Yes.
Then, you're kind of destined to not go very far.
Oh, wow. That is beautiful. Matt, how can people get in touch with you if they want to hear the podcast, if they want to maybe get coaching from you or have you come in and talk to their team? What's the best way to do that?
Best way to find me is at my website, which is MatthewPHoffman.com. I give away free coaching, because people don't know what it's like and what the power is. And the clients I have right now are because they experienced what I can do and they said, I need that in my life. And so I'm a firm believer, I have a coach. We all have blind spots and it's really hard to know what we're not doing right or what we're missing or what we could have if we thought differently. I get a lot of juice working with executives, with companies, with individuals, and with couples, because when they succeed, that kind of fills my tank. And I feel like I'm empowered to help them to turn their dreams really into reality. And that's where it all starts.
Awesome. We'll definitely put that in the show notes. And if we want a copy of your book, where can we get that?
You can get it on Amazon. It's available audiobook or ebook, or you can get a hard copy as well. And Amazon Ingram Spark is also available there.
Awesome. Thank you so much. You've been a wonderful guest. I've learned so much. I'm extremely grateful. I'm sure our audience got a lot out of it.
My pleasure. I enjoyed talking with you today, Rick.
Likewise. Folks, thank you so much for watching or listening to another episode of the Relentless Pursuit of Winning podcast. We will catch you next time.